The call was still connected when the voice changed. That is the detail that has stayed with everyone who has read the transcript, not the silence that came after, not the static, not the moment the line went dead, but the seconds just before, when Margaret Asley pressed the phone harder against her ear and understood, with the particular certainty that only a mother can carry, that the voice answering her questions was no longer entirely the voice of her daughter. It was using her daughter's words. It was shaped around her daughter's cadences. But something inside it had shifted in a way that language was not built to describe. Something that Margaret would spend the following 3 years trying to name in interviews and depositions and late-night phone calls with investigators who listened carefully and wrote things down and never once told her she was wrong to feel what she felt. Her daughter's name was Callie Asley. She was 26 years old on the night of October 14, 2017, a Saturday, when she called her mother from a rest stop on Interstate 70 in eastern Utah, somewhere in the long corridor of highway between Green River and the Colorado state line, where the landscape flattens into something so wide and so empty that the sky looks less like sky and more like a ceiling pressing down. Callie was driving back to Denver after a weekend visit to Salt Lake City, a trip she had made before, a route she knew, a drive of roughly 4 hours that she had never once described as anything other than boring. She called her mother at 9:47 in the evening to say she had stopped to use the restroom and get gas, and that she would be home by 1 in the morning at the latest. The call lasted 11 minutes and 43 seconds. Callie's phone was found 8 days later in a drainage ditch 312 meters from the rest stop parking lot. Callie herself was never found. What you are about to hear is not a story about a missing woman on a highway. That is the version that fits inside a police report, and the police report exists, and it is thorough, and it does not explain anything. What this is, really, is a story about what Margaret Asley heard in those final 40 seconds of a phone call, and what that means for everything that happened before the line went dead, and what it might mean for everything that cannot be accounted for in the gap between the last word her daughter said and the moment the signal dropped. There are investigators who have reviewed the audio recording of that call. There are acoustic analysts and voice forensic specialists who have submitted formal written assessments of the recording. None of them, in any of their reports, have been able to explain what happens to Callie Asley's voice in those last 40 seconds. Not in a way that closes the question, not in a way that lets you stop thinking about it. This story has been sitting with people who know it for 7 years. It has circulated in missing persons advocacy groups and cold case forums, and in the kind of quiet conversations that people have late at night when they have run out of rational explanations and are finally willing to say what they actually think. It has never been resolved. It has never been adequately investigated at the federal level. And Margaret Asley, who is 61 years old and lives in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, where she moved 18 months after her daughter disappeared because she could not bear to live in a place that still expected Callie to come home, has never stopped listening to those last 40 seconds. She has listened to them more times than she can count. She says the voice gets clearer every time, and she says that clarity does not make it easier. It makes it worse. If you have been carrying a question like this one, a story you heard or read or half remember that never got a satisfying answer, you already know why this channel exists. Subscribe if you have not yet. We take these questions seriously, every single one. There is something this channel has always tried to do, which is to be the place where the questions you were told to let go of are treated with the weight they deserve. Not to sensationalize, not to perform fear, but to sit with the real discomfort of things that do not resolve neatly, and to do that alongside people who understand why that matters. If you have been here before, you know what this space is. If you are new, subscribe and stay. These stories need witnesses. We read every comment on this channel. We do not take that lightly. If something in what you have heard so far has already moved something in you, stop here for a second. Drop a comment below. You do not have to explain everything. Just tell us, have you ever heard a voice change on a phone call in a way you could not explain? Use the phrase, "the voice shifted," in your comment so other people watching can find your story. You are not the only one. And seeing your words in the comments means the next person who watches this realizes they are not the only one either. That matters more than the algorithm does. There are people who listen to these stories not because they enjoy being frightened, but because something in their own life has already convinced them that the world contains more categories of experience than the ones with official names. If that is you, this comment section is for you specifically. Drop in, stay a while. We are paying attention. The rest stop where Callie Asley made her last phone call is called the Spotted Wolf Canyon Rest Area. It sits at mile marker 147 on Interstate 70 in Emery County, Utah, a facility that the Utah Department of Transportation had retrofitted in 2014 with new lighting, updated restroom facilities, an emergency call box mounted on a concrete pillar near the vending machines, and a camera system that covered the parking area, the main building entrance, and the westbound on-ramp. The camera facing the parking area was functioning correctly on the night of October 14, 2017. This is documented in the maintenance log submitted to the UDOT District Office in Price on October 23, 2017, 9 days after Callie's disappearance, as part of the agency's response to a formal information request from the Carbon and Emery County Sheriff's offices. The camera recorded continuously from 6 p.m. that evening through 6 a.m. the following morning. Callie's white 2013 Honda Civic, license plate number 7WBJ441, appears in the footage at 9:31 p.m., pulling into a space in the second row from the building. Callie herself can be seen exiting the vehicle at 9:33 p.m. She is wearing a grey hooded sweatshirt, dark jeans, and white sneakers. She has a shoulder bag. She walks toward the building with the slightly hurried gait of someone who has been driving for a long time and needs the restroom. She disappears through the entrance at 9:34 p.m. The camera does not cover the interior of the building or the back of the facility. Callie Asley does not appear again in any frame of the footage for the remainder of the recording period. Her car remains in the second row of the parking lot through the entire night and is still there when the footage ends at 6 a.m. Neither Callie nor any person matching her description is visible exiting the building on the main camera or on any of the other cameras. She went in, and she did not come out through any door that was being recorded. The phone call began at 9:47 p.m., which means it started approximately 13 minutes after she entered the building. This is a detail that investigators noted. 13 minutes is longer than most people take to use a highway rest stop restroom, particularly someone in a hurry to get back on the road. The bathroom attendant who was on duty that night, a woman named Rosalie Ferris, who worked the evening shift at the Spotted Wolf facility 3 nights a week, told Emery County investigators during an interview conducted on October 16th that she had seen a young woman matching Callie's description in the women's restroom that evening. She said the woman had gone into a stall and had been there for several minutes. She said she had thought nothing of it. She said that when she looked again, the stall door was open and no one was inside. She did not see the woman leave. She told investigators that she had been sweeping the floor near the sink area and had not been watching the entrance. She said she could not have missed anyone walking past her if they used the door she could see from where she was standing. She was asked twice whether that meant the woman had not left through that door. She said she did not know how else to interpret what she had observed. The interview is part of case file EC 2017-4491, opened by the Emery County Sheriff's Office on October 15, 2017, and subsequently transferred to the Utah Bureau of Investigation on October 22nd. The phone call itself. Margaret Asley was at home in Columbus when her phone rang. She answered on the second ring, which she has said in every interview she has given since October 2017, because she wants people to understand that she was not distracted, she was not half listening, she was fully present for the entire conversation. She said Callie sounded normal for the first several minutes. Not happy exactly, not unhappy, just the version of normal that belongs to a tired young woman who's been in a car for 3 hours and still has 2 more to go. They talked about the visit. They talked about a friend of Callie's who had recently gotten engaged. They talked briefly about Thanksgiving, which was 6 weeks away. Margaret asked if Callie was getting back on the road soon. Callie said yes. In a couple minutes, she just wanted to hear her mom's voice for a bit. Margaret said she remembered laughing at that. She said it was such a Callie thing to say. At approximately the 10-minute mark of the call, Margaret has said she noticed a change in the quality of the audio. Not static exactly, not interference in the sense of a signal breaking up. She described it in her first statement to investigators as a kind of deepening, as if the sound was coming from further back inside the phone than it should have been, as if there was additional space between where Callie was speaking and where the microphone was picking her up, even though that is not how phones work, and she knew that was not a rational description. She said the words Callie spoke in this period were completely coherent. Callie said she should get going. She said she loved her mom. She said she would text when she got on the road. All of it was recognizable as something Callie would say. But the voice carrying those words had something in it that Margaret could not place and has never been able to fully explain in any of the language available to her. She has tried the word hollow. She has tried the word distant. She has tried to say it sounded like an echo of itself, which she immediately acknowledged makes no technical sense. The closest she has come in a recorded interview conducted by independent researcher Dana Howell in March of 2019 is to say that it sounded the way a recording of Callie would sound if the recording had been made in a room that was not the room the rest stop bathroom actually was, like a different acoustic space, like somewhere with no walls. The last thing Margaret heard before the line went dead was her daughter saying her name, not Mom, her first name, Margaret. Callie had not called her by her first name since she was 15 years old and trying to win an argument. The way she said it in those final seconds was not argumentative. It was deliberate. It was the voice of someone choosing a word with great care. And then the line dropped. Not gradually, instantly. The kind of disconnection that feels less like a signal failure and more like a door closing. Margaret called back immediately. The call went directly to voicemail. She called 5 more times over the next 40 minutes. Voicemail every time. At 11:30 p.m., when Callie had not arrived home and had not responded to any messages, Callie's roommate in Denver, a woman named Priya Nanduri, called Margaret to ask if she had heard from her. They decided to wait until midnight before calling the police. They called at 11:58 p.m. The Emery County Sheriff's Office was formally notified at 12:14 a.m. on October 15, 2017. Margaret's phone retained the call log. The recording of the call was preserved through the standard automated backup system associated with her carrier, which at the time was a service that stored calls flagged as longer than 10 minutes in a compressed audio format for up to 90 days. Margaret did not know this backup existed until a telecommunications analyst working with the Utah Bureau of Investigation contacted her in November 2017 to inform her that they had located and retrieved the recording. She was not present when investigators first reviewed it. She was told afterward that they had listened to it in full. She was not told initially what they found. It took 14 days and a formal written request from the attorney she had retained to get any specific information about the call's contents. What she was told, in a letter dated December 1st, 2017, was that the recording was being subjected to additional analysis and that the results of that analysis would be shared with her in due course. The results were shared with her on February 9th, 2018, nearly 4 months after her daughter disappeared. The analysis was conducted by a contracted audio forensics firm based in Salt Lake City called Meridian Acoustic Consulting, and the report it produced is document number UBI 17-4491-AUD01, dated January 31st, 2018. The public version of that report, obtained through a records request filed by independent researcher Dana Howell in 2019, runs to 22 pages. The first 18 pages deal with technical aspects of the audio quality, signal compression, ambient noise analysis, and voice pattern mapping. The final 4 pages address what the report calls anomalous characteristics in the terminal segment of the recording, defined as the final 42 seconds of the call. The language in those 4 pages is precise and careful in the way that technical language becomes careful when the people writing it do not fully understand what they are describing. The report states that voice frequency analysis of the terminal segment reveals a measurable deviation from the baseline vocal pattern established in the preceding 10 minutes and 3 seconds of the call. It states that this deviation is not consistent with emotional state variation, ambient noise interference, signal compression artifacts, or any acoustic distortion pattern associated with standard cellular transmission degradation. It states that the deviation is characterized by what it calls a resonance anomaly, specifically a secondary frequency layer present in the terminal segment that does not appear anywhere else in the recording and that does not correspond to any acoustic source identifiable within the environment of the rest-stop facility as documented in the available records. The report recommends further analysis by a specialist in vocal biometrics. It does not speculate about the cause. It does not offer an alternative explanation. It ends with the observation that the secondary frequency layer is consistent in amplitude and pattern throughout the terminal segment, meaning it does not fade in or build gradually. It is simply present at full intensity from the first word of the terminal segment to the last. The vocal biometrics specialist who conducted the follow-up analysis was a man named Dr. Leonard Voss, a faculty member at the University of Utah's Department of Communication Sciences, who had spent 23 years working on voice identification technology for law enforcement agencies across the western United States. His report, submitted to the Utah Bureau of Investigation in April 2018 under reference number UBI 17-4491-VBI-01, was 12 pages long. The portion made available through the records request is 9 pages. The remaining 3 are withheld under a provision of Utah Code 63G2305, which pertains to records the disclosure of which would jeopardize an ongoing investigation. As of the date of this video, the investigation is listed as active in the Utah Bureau of Investigation's Public Case Registry, Case Status Code A1, which means open and unsolved. The 9 available pages of Dr. Voss's report confirm the secondary frequency finding from the Meridian report and add several observations that have not been widely circulated. One is that the secondary frequency, when isolated from the main vocal track using spectral separation software, produces what Dr. Voss describes as a non-random pattern. He specifies that he is not characterizing this pattern as speech or as any identifiable form of intentional communication. He specifies that he cannot rule out that characterization either. He writes that the pattern structure is sufficiently complex and sufficiently differentiated from environmental noise to warrant the conclusion that it is not the product of random signal interference. He writes that it is present in the terminal segment of the recording in a way that is, and he italicizes this word in the original document, structured. He does not explain further. The report ends with a recommendation for consultation with specialists in acoustic phonology and signal intelligence. There is no record in the publicly available case file of any such consultation having occurred. Margaret Asley heard the recording for the first time in March 2018, 5 months after the call, at a meeting with her attorney and a representative from the Utah Bureau of Investigation at the UBI field office in Provo. She was told before she listened that the audio had been technically analyzed and that she should be prepared for it to be difficult to hear. She said in subsequent interviews that nothing they said prepared her for what it was actually like to sit in that room with headphones on and listen to her daughter's voice change. She said the first 10 minutes were the hardest because they were completely normal, because listening to Callie talk about Thanksgiving plans, knowing what was about to happen, was the kind of pain that does not have a name in English. And then she said the terminal segment began, and she said the pain became a different kind of thing entirely. She said the voice that said Margaret at the end of the call was Callie's voice, the way a photograph is a person, recognizably derived from the original, containing all the right elements, but flat in a dimension that the original was not flat, absent in some quality that she could not name because the quality had no name, present in some other quality that also had no name, and that she would very much have preferred not to know about. She has not listened to the recording again since that day in Provo. She said she does not need to. She said the terminal segment has become a permanent feature of her internal acoustic memory, the way certain pieces of music become permanently attached to certain experiences. She said she hears it sometimes at 3 in the morning when she wakes up for no reason. She said it sounds different at 3 in the morning than it did in the conference room. She said at 3 in the morning it sounds closer. If you are still watching, you understand already why this case has stayed unresolved for 7 years. But the recording is not the only thing that does not fit inside a rational account of what happened at the Spotted Wolf Canyon rest area on the night of October 14, 2017. There are other details, documented in the case file and in the independent research that has accumulated around it, that pull in the same direction without ever quite arriving at the same place. Each one of them is explicable in isolation. Together, they become something else. The first of these is the testimony of a truck driver named Harold Pruitt, who had been parked in the commercial vehicle section of the Spotted Wolf rest stop since approximately 8:15 p.m. that evening, and who was still in his cab at 9:47 p.m. when Callie's call to her mother began. Pruitt submitted a voluntary statement to the Emery County Sheriff's Office on October 18, 2017, 3 days after the investigation was opened, after seeing a news item about Callie's disappearance and recognizing the location. He stated that at some point between 9:30 and 10:01 p.m. he had observed a white compact car, which investigators subsequently confirmed matched the description of Callie's Civic, in the second row of the passenger vehicle parking area. He stated that he had gotten out of his cab to use the vending machines at approximately 9:55 p.m., and that as he walked through the parking area, he had noticed that the white compact car was still parked in the same spot, with no one visible inside. He stated that he had noticed this specifically because he had also observed the car arriving about 20 minutes earlier and had expected the driver to have gotten back on the road by then. He stated that as he walked past the car, he heard something. He described it as a sound coming from inside the vehicle, a kind of low, continuous sound that he initially thought was the radio, very quiet, almost below the threshold of hearing. He said he had paused and listened for a moment. He said the more he listened, the less certain he was that it was the radio. He said it had a rhythm to it that was not quite regular enough for music and not quite irregular enough for speech. He said it made him feel, and he was apologetic about this phrasing, as if he should not be hearing it, as if he had put his ear up against something he was not meant to be close to. He said he walked quickly to the vending machine and walked back to his cab without passing the white car again. He said he did not see anyone near the vehicle at any point. He said the sound stopped, or he stopped being able to hear it before he reached his cab. He could not say exactly when. Pruitt's statement was included in the case file and noted by investigators, but was not, as far as the available records indicate, followed up with any specific forensic analysis of the vehicle's interior sound environment. The Honda Civic was recovered from the parking lot on October 22nd, 8 days after the disappearance, and transported to a state evidence facility in Price. The forensic examination log available through the records request covers paint transfer analysis, interior fiber sampling, fingerprint collection, and electronic data extraction from the infotainment system. There is no entry in the log corresponding to acoustic analysis of the vehicle's interior. Callie's phone was found in the drainage ditch on October 22nd as well, the same day as the vehicle recovery. The case file notes that the screen was intact and the battery was at 4% charge when discovered. The phone was powered off, which investigators noted was unusual given the battery level, since a phone at 4% does not typically power itself off. It simply dies when the charge runs out. This one was off. Not dead. Off. The infotainment system data extracted from the Honda Civic showed the vehicle's last active navigation session, which had been running continuously from the moment Callie left Salt Lake City earlier that afternoon. The destination was entered as Callie's Denver address. The route selected by the system was Interstate 70 eastbound through the spotted Wolf Canyon corridor. The data also showed that the system had logged an unexpected GPS position error at 9:49 p.m., 2 minutes into the phone call, lasting approximately 38 seconds before resolving itself. During those 38 seconds, the navigation system recorded the vehicle's position as a coordinate that does not correspond to any point on the road network within a 100-mile radius of the actual location. The coordinate, when plotted on a standard map, falls in the middle of the San Rafael Swell, a remote geological formation roughly 40 kilometers north of Interstate 70. There are no roads at that coordinate. There is, according to the USGS topographic database, a small canyon feature at that location, unnamed, approximately 60 meters deep, accessed only by foot trails used occasionally by recreational hikers. No connection between this coordinate error and Callie's disappearance has been established in any official document. The navigation system technician who reviewed the data for investigators noted in his assessment that GPS position errors of this duration and magnitude are extremely uncommon but not technically impossible, and that the most likely cause would be signal multipathing caused by canyon walls or a hardware anomaly in the vehicle's receiver unit. He noted this as the most likely cause. He also noted that the magnitude of the positional error, a displacement of approximately 40 kilometers, was at the outer edge of anything he had personally encountered in 12 years of automotive electronics work. There is a woman named Terry Calander who runs a missing persons advocacy organization based in Moab, Utah, called the San Rafael Search Network. The organization was founded in 2009 and focuses specifically on disappearances in the corridor between Interstate 70 and Highway 24 in central Utah, a stretch of territory that Calander has spent 14 years arguing is statistically anomalous with respect to the number of unresolved missing persons cases it generates relative to its population and traffic volume. Calander is not a paranormal researcher. She is a former search and rescue volunteer who became a full-time advocate after her nephew disappeared on a hiking trip in the San Rafael Swell in 2011 and was never found. She does not traffic in unusual explanations. She traffics in data. The data she has compiled, which she presents in a publicly available report titled Disappearance Clusters on the San Rafael Corridor, version 4, published in 2022, documents 67 cases of disappearance in her designated study area between 1988 and 2021 that share a specific set of characteristics. The disappearance occurred in or adjacent to a public facility such as a rest stop, campground or trailhead parking area. The person was last confirmed present on surveillance footage or in the testimony of a witness. No physical remains or personally identifying evidence was located outside the facility itself, and no explanation accounting for the complete absence of physical trace evidence has been established. She acknowledges in her introduction that 67 cases over 33 years in a broad geographic area is not, in statistical terms, an obviously anomalous number. She then spends the next 218 pages arguing that the specific characteristics shared by these cases, particularly the combination of witnessed presence, absence from exit footage, and absolute zero trace outside the facility, represent a clustering pattern that is not explained by the base rate of missing persons in comparable geographic areas. She submitted this report to the FBI field office in Salt Lake City in January 2022 and received an acknowledgement letter dated February 3, 2022, confirming receipt. She has received no substantive response. Callie Asley's case is number 43 in her database. The detail that Terry Callender returns to most consistently in interviews about the San Rafael corridor cases is the question of last known words. In 11 of the 67 cases she documents, the missing person was confirmed to have been on a phone call in the minutes immediately preceding their disappearance. Of those 11 cases, 7 involved calls to family members. In 5 of those 7 cases, the family member who received the call reported noticing a change in the quality or character of the missing person's voice in the final portion of the call. Callender is careful about how she presents this. She describes it as a reported phenomenon, not a documented one. She notes that grief and retrospective interpretation are powerful forces that can cause family members to attribute significance to details they might not have noticed in a different context. She includes the data anyway, because she believes the function of a database is to record what is reported, not to adjudicate what is real. The 5 family members who reported the voice change are listed in the report's appendix with case numbers and dates. One of the case numbers is UC 43. That is Callie Asley. The note in the appendix next to UC 43 reads, "Mother reports voice change in terminal 40 seconds. Audio recording confirmed. Forensic analysis ongoing as of report date." If this is the first time you are hearing this case, or if you have followed it for years and have never seen it laid out this way, hit the like button. It tells us that this work matters and it helps other people find stories that deserve to be found. Callie Asley deserves to be found. This is part of how that happens. The question of the recording has not gone away in 7 years, and it has not simplified with time. If anything, the people who know it most closely describe it as becoming more complicated the more carefully it is examined. Dana Howell, the independent researcher who has produced the most comprehensive public account of the Asley case, spent 8 months between 2019 and 2020 attempting to locate academic researchers willing to conduct an independent analysis of the terminal segment audio. She contacted 14 institutions. She received 3 responses. 1 declined on the grounds that the subject matter fell outside their research scope. 1 expressed interest and then withdrew after a period of email correspondence that Howell describes in her published account as having become progressively more uncomfortable without any specific incident she could point to. 1. A researcher in the Department of Phonetics at a university in the Pacific Northwest, whom Howell does not identify by name at the researcher's request, agreed to review a copy of the isolated terminal segment audio and provided a written assessment in July 2020 that Howell has published in full. The assessment is 2 pages. It begins by noting the unusual character of the secondary frequency layer and confirming the non-random structure finding from Dr. Voss's earlier report. It then describes a specific feature of the secondary pattern that neither the Meridian report nor the Voss report had noted. The anonymous researcher writes that when the secondary frequency layer is slowed to 60% of its recorded speed and run through a harmonic series filter, it produces what they describe as interval structures that are consistent with tonal language phonology. They specify that they are not claiming the secondary frequency constitutes speech in any identifiable human language. They specify that the interval structures are consistent with the kind of patterning found in tonal languages in the same way that certain naturally occurring formations are consistent with geometric shapes without being geometric shapes. They use the phrase suggestive but not conclusive and underline it. They state that the presence of these structures in a recording made on a cellular phone at a highway rest stop in Utah in 2017 is not something they can account for within the frameworks available to them. They thank Dana Howell for sharing the material and express the hope that someone better positioned than they are will examine it more rigorously. They have not published any research related to this material in any academic venue. When Howell followed up with them in 2021, they replied to say they had decided not to pursue the analysis further and asked that their contact information not be shared with additional parties. Margaret Asley has been told about each of these developments as they occurred. She absorbs them in the way that someone absorbs information that they already knew but did not have the language for. She said in her most recent public interview, recorded in September 2023 for a podcast called Corridors of Loss, that she has made peace with the fact that she is not going to receive a conventional explanation for what happened to her daughter. She said she does not experience this as acceptance. She said she experiences it more like standing in a room where the door you expected to open simply does not have a handle, and at some point you stop looking for the handle and you start paying attention to what the room itself is trying to tell you. She said the room has been telling her something for 6 years and she is still learning to hear it clearly. She was asked what she thinks it is telling her. She was quiet for a long time. She said she thinks it is telling her that wherever Callie went, she was not taken. She said she does not know how to explain the difference between those two things, and she is not sure the difference would comfort anyone else. But she said it comforts her in a specific way on specific nights. That there is a difference. That there is a distinction between being lost and being absent. That Callie is not, as far as her mother can tell from inside a room with no handle on the door, simply gone. The Spotted Wolf Canyon rest area was upgraded again in 2020 as part of a UDOT facility improvement program, new pavement, additional lighting in the commercial vehicle section, a second camera covering the eastbound on-ramp, everything recorded, everything monitored, everything functioning correctly. The facility processes an average of 400 vehicles per day in summer months and approximately 260 in the winter. People stop there every day of the year. They use the restroom. They buy something from the vending machine. They get back in their cars. They drive east toward Colorado or west toward Green River. They arrive where they are going. The rest stop stands in the flat corridor where the desert opens up on both sides and the sky does the thing it does in that part of Utah, which is to make everything below it feel very small and very exposed and very far from anything that would notice if something changed. There is a detail in Terry Calander's report that appears in a footnote on page 144, and that most people who have read the report say they nearly missed the first time. The footnote addresses the geographic relationship between the GPS coordinate anomaly in Callie's navigation system and the unnamed canyon feature in the San Rafael swell that the coordinate corresponds to. Callie notes that this unnamed canyon, which she visited in the summer of 2021 as part of her field research, is not notable in any documented way. It is one of hundreds of similar geological formations in the swell. It does not appear in any record of archaeological significance, geological anomaly, or environmental designation. There is nothing there that would draw attention on a map or in a database. Except one thing. In the USGS Geographic Names database, the canyon has no official name, but carries a field notation entered by a survey team in 1974. The notation reads, "Local usage suggests informal name." Callie records the informal name that local usage suggests. She found it by interviewing an elderly rancher who had worked land adjacent to the swell for 40 years and who knew the formation well. He used the name without apparent awareness of any connection to her research. He said it was what people in the area had always called it. He did not know where the name came from. He said it was just what it was. The informal name, as Callie records it in the footnote, translates loosely from an older regional usage that she does not fully gloss. She provides only the translation. The canyon, according to the rancher and the 1974 survey notation and no other known source, is called the place where voices wait. If this story is with you right now, if you are sitting somewhere with the feeling that you are not quite finished with it, even though the facts have been laid out and the timeline has been accounted for and every available document has been considered, you understand something that cannot be explained in a report. That feeling is not confusion. It is recognition. Subscribe if you have not. Come back next week. The next case involves a woman who answered a phone call from her husband 2 days after he was confirmed dead. The call lasted 4 minutes. The recording exists, and whoever was on the other end of that line knew things about her that her husband would have known and that no one else alive could have. Margaret Asley still has Callie's contact saved in her phone. She has not deleted it. She says she does not plan to. She says there are nights when she picks up her phone and sees Callie's name in the recent calls list, still there from October 14, 2017, and she feels the specific texture of those 11 minutes and 43 seconds pass through her again in a way she cannot control and would not want to even if she could. She says on those nights she sometimes holds the phone against her ear, the way she was holding it when Callie said her name at the end of the call. She says she listens to the silence in the speaker, and she does what her daughter seemed to be doing in those final 40 seconds of a phone call in a highway rest stop in the Utah desert. She pays attention. She waits. And she says that once, just once, in the specific quality of the static that lives in a phone when no call is connected and nothing is happening and the line is technically dead, she heard something that made her sit very still for a very long time. She has not said what it was. In every interview in which she has been asked, she says she does not think she is ready to give it a name. She says names are how you make something yours, and she is not sure this thing belongs to her yet. She is not sure it belongs to the language she has available. She's not sure, and this is the last thing she says on the subject every time it is raised, that the place where you go when a voice like that calls your name operates according to the same rules as the place you were standing when you heard it.